It was a peaceful Sunday afternoon when a high-pitched droning sound pierced the tropical Hawaiian air with bullets, bombs, and violence. However, the attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1942 was only part of what led up to the Japanese internment camps.
When President Roosevelt came out with his policy to get rid of all the Japanese and Japanese Americans from the West Coast, it was strictly hysteria, war hysteria. And there was also an economic point because many of the Japanese farmers owned land which the white farmers wanted, and they took it away from them, although not all the cases. And the Japanese, for example, farmed almost 100% of the strawberries at that time. It was all gone, taken away. The Japanese also farmed almost 90% of the lettuce, which was taken away. So all these things came into play. And General DeWitt, who was the head of the army around that area, said, once a Jap, always a Jap. So you see what the prejudice was?
Japanese immigrants started to come to California in the summer of 1869. The number grew to over 24,000 by 1900 and to over 41,000 by 1910. Racism raised its ugly head with the Immigration Act of 1924, which forbade Japanese immigration to the United States for many years. Many Japanese came to the United States with the intentions of raising their families and to become part of the United States society. They experienced many subtle forms of discrimination, but also felt protected by their new friends they made here.
Many soldiers died in Pearl Harbor. Their relatives are very hurt, upset, right? And so when they see the Japanese, they think about the soldiers in Japan who did all of this. So, emotions are very strong.
On February 19, 1942, President Roosevelt signed Executive Order 9066, authorizing the removal of incarceration of over 110,000 Japanese Americans. 2/3 were American citizens and 1/2 were children.
Executive Order 9066 was an order that made the Japanese Americans go to the internment camps and took away all their land, property, money, and friends. Executive Order 9066 was signed by President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who was president at that time. This order was executed only a couple months after the attack and was put on almost all store windows, street posts, and newspaper stands. This order was only for people of Japanese descent. A lot of the people going to the internment camps thought of it as a new experience, but not all. A lot of the parents who went were nervous because they actually knew what was going on. The parents and elders suffered more than the children and the infants because they had a hard time moving around in places because the camps were very big and had a lot of barracks that looked exactly the same, so they were easy to get lost. Was this really the reason for the internment of Japanese Americans?
Indirectly, I would say so. We still got the face of it, Japanese.
But it's generally, I think, basically it's economics.
They have a sales power, so successful. They just want to lock them up, take away the property.
So he knew that they were going to bomb Pearl Harbor, but he didn't say anything. He let it happen. That's something that most people don't know. So he did it for a selfish reason, and we had to suffer for it. I think as President Roosevelt, he wanted the economy of United States America to be, good. So if there's war, what happens? There's jobs.
Was there anything good during the camps?
Probably were safer in camp than being on the outside.
Kids around my age or a little bit older with a good experience. It was nothing that we suffered or anything. I think people in Japan suffer much more than we did.
Was everybody racist?
Can you tell me about the time the soldiers found your father's knife?
Well, that was when they were searching every room for food or contraband. My father was in bed because he was getting ready. He just had surgery, his stomach surgery. So he was in bed. So the 3 soldiers came in and looked around. He opened the bag of rice. The rice is not supposed to be in anybody's room. So he says, "What should I do with these beans?" "Oh, we don't have to take beans. Leave it here." So he left it. And then, because he knew my father was sick, because he was in bed. And he looked around and and he saw our radio. Oh yeah, that's a small radio. We don't have to check that one. And then see if my father was really in his gown or if he was dressed, you know, to invest. They had to check everybody out, right? My father was in his gown, but then he saw the knife that was that it was showing under his pillow. And so he pulled it out, and it's a carving knife. And he looked at my father, and my father showed his surgery, and he showed his broken leg. And so he figured my father had that to protect us. And so he didn't say anything and just walked out, left him with his knife. Monday after Pearl Harbor, when we were at school, it was the assembly and said that we, the Japanese American in the school, our classes, are not Japanese. We were not the ones who started the war, and we're just as much a victim as they were, and that we will not be discriminated against, and we are to still remain the same as friends. And we'd go to a soda shop, but then there's a sign, no Japs allowed, no Japs allowed. Said, come on, Hideko. I said, but I can't go in because the sign says no Jap. Come on, your name is Osaki. That's an Irish name, so you're an Irish, come on. And they took me in, and when the owner at the store looked at me and says, you know, he was trying to tell me to get out, and my friend was, hey, no, she's Irish. She's not Japanese, she's Irish. She's an Osaki. And so he had to serve me. A few of my our classmates, they took all day to drive up to Tule Lake to visit us. They allowed 15 minutes visit, that was it. And they had to drive all the way back. But they came bringing us cookies and candies and nice classmates.
How do you feel about the apology letters and restitution from President Bush in 1990 and again from President Clinton in 1993?
How much money did they give you after they gave you the apology letter?
Money isn't worth anything, really.
Japanese Americans try to remind everyone of what happened to Japanese Americans during World War II with pilgrimages to Manzanar, one of the internment camps. There still is racism going on today in parts of the world, even in America. The treatments of Muslims ever since 9/11 would be an example. Is it right that a Muslim woman does not get hired because an organization is concerned about how a woman wearing a hijab would be received by their community? According to the New York Times, in 2009, Muslims made up less than 2% of the U.S. population, yet they accounted for about 1/4 of the 3,386 religious discrimination claims with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission.
You know, racism is something that I think everybody hates. You know, when you saw stories of Sikhs, those were the branch of Indians who wore the turban, and they were being mistaken as Muslims, and people were displaying hatred towards them. You know, it's hate, because, you know, you hate to see that action where people are judging somebody else based on an outward appearance, based on a belief, and not simply on who they are.
American TV helped promote racism to Muslim in this country.
I think the American TV, you know, or Fox News definitely promotes stereotypes that aren't necessarily true.
Even in the midst of discrimination against Japanese Americans during the internment camps, some Americans did not discriminate and even protected their Japanese American friends. America has learned a lot about discrimination, but it is still learning and there is room for improvement. For example, the country has elected an African American president, but Muslims are still facing discrimination, especially since 9/11. Still, Muslims are getting bullied in school, and even teachers are giving them zeros because students won't take off their kufis, hijabs, and turbans. Did America really learn anything, or did America just write the apology letter to forget about it?